Hello, my Diecast family. How's everybody doing today? All right, so I've got another video on a crossover interest to show you, which, as you can see, is clearly commercial aircraft. That's one of my little passing interests I have, in addition to model trains and things like that. And you've no doubt seen the video I showed you earlier of the other Daron aircraft I have. They were kind of the lesser expensive, less detailed mainline Daron aircraft that have a combination, metal and plastic construction. Okay, well, these here that I'm going to show you today are a little bit nicer. These are part of what's called Daron's Postage Stamp Series. You probably no doubt see that on the box there. Okay, and the Postage Stamp Series, they cost a little bit more than the other ones, the standard series, but they also have a lot more detail. And they're also 100% constructed of metal. There is no plastic in these. So when you pick one of these up, you can actually feel some significant weight. And, I didn't want to buy a whole bunch of these because, like I said, they cost a little bit more. And also, I'm kind of limited on space I can display these planes. Even though displaying the planes is a little bit easier because these two come with stands. So I'm able to kind of stagger them out on the top, those acrylic cases a little bit better. So, yeah, they'll display pretty well. But I don't want to overrun everything with them either, okay? So these two planes I'm going to show you are my most favorite commercial airliners of all time. And I actually missed them both. And one of them I didn't even get a chance to fly in, and that's the L-1011 that you see spinning on the turntable there by Delta, okay? I love this airplane. I've never had a chance to fly in one. I think my brother did get to fly in one. I think it was a TWA version. But yeah, I unfortunately never got a chance to fly a Lockheed TriStar L-1011, and I always regret that because they were a really neat airplane. There's just something very special about them. Even pilots talk very wistfully about this aircraft to this day because of how special it was. There's only one working, functional L-1011 left in the world today, and that is it's operated by something called Stargazer. They do, I don't know what they do exactly with it. I don't know if they do tours or whatnot. But I've seen the video of it, and it's really impressive. There's an intact, it's not functional, but there is an intact L-1011 that you can visit on a beach in, get this, South Africa, okay? And I think it was a former All Nippon Airways L-1011 that was built during the 1970s. And now it's literally sitting on a beach. It has a full interior. It's got most of the avionics in place, but obviously the engines are out of it and everything. But yeah, it's there intact, and you can go visit that and walk around it for a nominal fee. It's actually pretty cool. It's actually quite a tourist attraction. So if you ever feel the urge to visit South Africa and you're an airline enthusiast kind of geek, that would be a place to go visit, okay? All right, so Delta and the L-1011 have a long history together because Delta had the largest L-1011 fleet of everybody. And it's a tri-jet, as you can see. Two under the wing and one in the tail. And I really like the way, even though the DC-10 is also a tri-jet, Lockheed did their version a little nicer. See how well integrated the intake is with the engine mounted right back here? There was an S-shaped duct that fed the air from here and then delivered it to the engine. And then the way they did this vertical stabilizer is just really stunning to me. I just love the way they did that. These were powered by Rolls-Royce RB211 engines, which were very, very powerful. They were known for being a little bit smoky on startup because when they aged a little bit, they would kind of leak a little bit of oil, I guess, into the combustion chamber area. You'll notice there's kind of a size difference between these two. That's because this one's scaled at 1 in 500. That one's scaled at 1 in 400. There's little beacon lights depicted on top of the roof here, which I think is really cool, at the top of the fuselage. You can see that the slats and ailerons are actually very well defined as opposed to the other, more cheaper version. Just really nicely done aircraft. This one has realistic landing gear. This is exactly what the landing gear is supposed to look like. There's the little slot for the stand. And then I was feeling these tires. These tires are actually made of rubber. That was really cool, which is nice because then it makes it to where it will stay in place very good. But yeah, it's got very nice details. Everything from, the Delta logo, the little windows, the stripes, the Delta script right here. And yeah, this is a really nice aircraft, the Lockheed TriStar. And I remember one of their niftiest features they had was in the rear, traditionally that's where the lavatories, most of the lavatories are located in the rear. Well, in the rear, they were arranged in a semicircle pattern. And there was a little bit of space back there. And on long flights, that used to be kind of a congregating area for passengers. They'd be all getting ready to use the John, and they'd be back there talking and everything. And this is also one of the first airliners to feature like in-flight movies, too. They had a movie screen in there. Wasn't like today where you have your separate screen on the back of your seat. They actually would just show a movie that the whole plane could enjoy if they liked. I remember watching Superman 3 on a DC-10 going from Denver to Philadelphia in 1983. It was a United. I remember seeing that movie on there. That was pretty wild. But yeah, there you go. That's a Daron Postage Stamp Series version of a beautiful Lockheed TriStar, one of my most favorite commercial aircrafts. And like I said before, I really regret having not gotten a chance to fly one of these. They're just spectacular aircrafts. And I think they only lost one of these I don't think no, actually, I remember two. There was two that got lost. There was a Delta Lockheed TriStar that got lost in '85. It got pummeled to the ground in a microburst. And then there was that Eastern Airlines one that crashed in the Miami Everglades and it was a fairly new aircraft. And I think that was just pilot error. They were screwing around with something and they lost track of what they were doing, and they ended up crashing a perfectly fine jet into the Everglades because they were messing around with something and they lost track of what they were doing. I think it was, believe it or not, a burned out bulb. They were messing with a burned out bulb and crashed a perfectly good aircraft that had nothing wrong with it. Unbelievable. They should have got more training, I guess, right? Because these were a very advanced aircraft. They could land by themselves and everything else. But yeah, that's really nice. And then it comes with this little stand right here. You'll see right here it says Delta Lockheed TriStar L-1011 TriStar. And then the little plane just fits right on there. Should be a nice tight fit. There we go. And then when you put that on there, the plane gets displayed like that, like it's taken off. You probably can't see it on top of the turntable. Let me bring it down a little bit here. That gives you an idea of how it looks on the stand. It's pretty nice. All right, we're going to move along. Now I'm going to show you its competitor, its cousin in the sky, the DC-10. Now you notice this is a little larger because, like I said, this is scaled at 1 in 400, not 1 in 500 like the TriStars. I was actually really shocked when I got these. I thought they were going to be the same size. I was like, geez, that Delta TriStar is so small compared to the Pan Am DC-10. All right, so let's talk about this for a second. So many of you are probably thinking, I never knew Pan Am had DC-10s. Neither did I. I thought that they were strictly, they didn't really have DC-10s. Well, here's what happened. In January of 1980, Pan Am acquired National Airways, who had a very extensive DC-10 fleet. And so when Pan Am acquired them, they also inherited their aircraft, which included those many DC-10s. And they, of course, took on those DC-10s, painted them up in their very beautiful livery with the blue and white. Also probably put their interiors in. Because, back in these days, the airlines used to personalize their interiors. They didn't have like these boring, standardized interiors like they do today. Back in those days, there were some really wild looking interiors. I remember getting on a DC-8 and being like, geez, man, this is like stepping back into a lounge in the 1970s or 1960s or something like that. So yeah, Pan Am took on National's DC-10 fleet. And this is a DC-10-30. Now, how do we know it's a DC-10-30? Because the -30 had this little extra landing gear in the center. Okay, the DC-10-30 was designed to carry a little heavier payloads. And so to give it a little extra help when it was on the ground and taking off and landing, they put this little extra landing gear in the middle there. These are also made of like a little rubber. Okay. Now the DC-10, they use a different, McDonnell-Douglas is who created this aircraft. So you'll see that McDonnell-Douglas took a different take with the tri-jet. They put the engine just mounted right on top of the fuselage in the horizontal, or the vertical stabilizer. And you can see it's just not as clean a design as the TriStar. In fact, even though some pilots do have some fond memories of the DC-10, they really like the TriStar better because of the cleanness of the design. And also the TriStar has a better safety record. The DC-10 had a lot of issues with the cargo door blowing off, and that was a problem. So they finally fixed that problem. Then they had that problem with the guys were replacing the engines. They were monkeying around, doing it incorrectly. And then that that DC-10, American Airlines DC-10, it took off in Dallas in 1979, lost the engine and it crashed on takeoff. It was a horrible accident. And it was because, and they found it was because they were doing the maintenance incorrectly. And then lo and behold, it happened again on its sister plane, the MD-11, with that UPS plane that went down in Kentucky last year. They were doing the same stupid thing, messing around, doing the maintenance incorrectly, and there were stress cracks, and they didn't take the proper measure, and then that airplane had the exact same problem. Left engine came off, and the plane crashed tragically. The loss of life was smaller because, it was a cargo plane, but still, still tragic either way, okay? So, yeah, the DC-10 does not have as good a safety record. In its later years, when they worked out all the problems, it actually became a very pleasant aircraft to fly on. I flew on many DC-10s. I've flown on them to Hawaii. I've flown on them from Denver to Philly. I've been on them a couple times. And one of the noteworthy things about them, I remember about them, besides being very wide and roomy inside, is their engines. They're made by General Electric. It's called a CF6, okay? And you can always tell when a DC-10 is taken to the skies because they have the most distinctive buzzsaw harmonic whine you've ever heard. I mean, it is unbelievable. In fact, aviation enthusiasts to this day actually look for third world airlines that are still flying these things so they can have the experience of flying on one of these beasts and hearing that noise again, because it really is an impressive sound. I remember being in my rented home in Deltona with my wife and hearing that distinctive sound in the sky, and I said to myself, that's got to be a DC-10. I looked up, and sure enough, it was. It was a tanker they were using to put out a wildfire, because the way these planes are designed, they can take off and land on a fairly short runway. And also because of their design, they're pretty maneuverable, and so they're actually quite suited for tanker duty and cargo duty and things like that. Well, yeah, when they were a passenger plane, they were quite an experience to fly on. And that's the Daron Postage Stamp Series right there in Pan Am livery. You see it has the same, they did a good job with the little slats and ailerons. You see little fans in the engines there too. The CF6, pretty well represented. Yeah, the DC-10 has, like I said, not as rosy a history as the Lockheed TriStar. Pilots don't talk as wistfully about this one today as they do the TriStar. But it's still a very interesting and significant vintage aircraft. And like I said, I kind of miss these two. I always thought that there was just something, I don't know, almost borderline mystical about them because of the way they're styled with those three engines and this, the sound they make. And it's just really cool. There's an airline in Bangladesh, Beam in Bangladesh, that, believe it or not, was still using one of these things. And it still had the 1970s tropical print interior that, as you can probably imagine, all these years later is beginning to pull away from the metal frames of the seats. And it really looks awful. And you wonder why everybody in their right mind want to get on this ancient thing. But you know what? There's actually a really good takeoff video of that particular aircraft, and it's actually a thing of beauty to watch it lift off into the sky. It's like flying into the sunset. It's almost like a symbolic gesture of like, yeah, this is the history of this aircraft flying off into the sunset, because I think that aircraft is now scrapped. I don't think it's flying anymore. So yeah, if you're an aviation enthusiast that's into the vintage stuff and you want to fly on one of these things, that'd be the way to do it. But like I said, I think it's been scrapped now. So there you go. That's just, like I said, nice little crossover interest I have, commercial airlines, especially vintage ones. I would like to get a 707. That's one of my other favorite ones, and maybe even a 727. And that'll probably be about it. I probably won't collect any more of these other than that, because I got space for maybe two more where it'll be up there nicely without taking up a bunch of room and becoming cluttered, because I don't want to do that. I don't want to clutter up the room. It's just, there's so much in here already. I've done a very good job of keeping it looking good and having everything stored and displayed very nicely without being too cluttered. But like I said, if I keep adding too many more things, I'll end up with a problem. And that's also one of the reasons why I got to come up with new ideas for content too. All right. So anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed that. And I want you all to take care of each other, and God bless. And as always, we'll see you again in the next video.